What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And today I'm going to be trying something new. I'm going to be trying out screen recording. I finally watched a tutorial on how to do it from the very kind and just like zero negative attitude from the comments from you guys on learning how to screen record. I'm kidding. There was a couple people that were kind of saying negative things, but you guys are still awesome. And you guys were awesome in responding to my poll that I posted on a few different options for franchises that I could review that I haven't talked about on the channel before that I wanted to. And the votes were overwhelmingly in support of reviewing Diary of a Wimpy Kid, or the original Diary of a Wimpy Kid trilogy, that is, excluding the terrible long haul 2017 movie, which I did watch a couple years ago and I could barely sit through it. It was so bad. But I don't get. First of all, I've written like a couple notes down here. The main thing I don't get is the critical reception to this franchise. And I never really get the critics' reception for anything because I think they've overrated a lot of things in game, and they've also kind of not been appreciating underrated things. And I mean, yeah, sure, critics, whatever, like the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies have problems, and I can pick them apart, right? But they're honestly pretty solid family films, and they do have valuable lessons. And one thing that I wrote down is that in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, one of my problems with them was the protagonist Greg Heffley. He never really learns anything in the books. They kind of try to make it seem like he sort of learned a lesson, or he either goes against what he already learned at the end of the book, or at the beginning of the next book. Kind of, it seems like he's forgotten about the lesson he learned. The thing that I really do appreciate about the movies is whatever happened in the last movie does lead into the next one. Like each movie kind of jumps ahead like a couple months to a year, and they do continue the story. It's a continuous story, and it does feel like whatever lesson Greg learned or whatever progression that Greg made in life does carry into the next movie, which I do appreciate because it does feel like he is consistently maturing. It doesn't feel like his maturity or his growth happens and then it just gets cut short, and then he has to learn something new that also gets cut short. And it does. I love the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books. I still read them. I still get them, and I still read them, and they're very fun, quick reads. They're not like the most mentally challenging books to read, of course, but I do like to read them, and I still purchase them, and I like to read them and see what's going on. And that's kind of one of my problems with the books, is it does feel like a continuous loop of Greg not really learning anything, but it does feel like in these movies that Greg does learn lessons by the end of it, and it does carry into the next one. And even by the end of the third one, right, he's not a perfect person, but he does feel like he does continuously and consistently change. Like in the third movie, he does something which he never would have done in the first two, and he literally gets Roderick a gig at whatever her name is, Holly, or sorry, not Holly, Heather Hills' Sweet 16 or something like that. And it's like he's just actually going out of his way to just do something nice for his brother, which you can see is definitely not something he would have done at the beginning of the first film. So it does feel like it's a good trilogy, and it does continue the ideas well, which is something that a lot of movies have problems with today, especially, Marvel movies and stuff like that. But I don't really think I need to compare the Diary of a Wimpy Kid trilogy to something like Marvel. And then something else I wanted to talk about is one of the reasons the new movie sucked so bad, The Long Haul. The reason why it sucked so bad is because the casting was a significant downgrade. And the casting in the original three is on point. Alright? Zachary Gordon fits his role perfectly. I forget the actor that played Rowley, but he's also really good. Devin Bostic as Roderick. Steve Zahn is the dad. And I forget the actress's name who plays the mom, but like all the casting's on point, and the humor as well is actually well written. Like I thought, okay, the critics, whatever, like they're giving it bad reviews, and the last time I watched it was when I was like, it's been actually a couple years, right? So I was probably like 10 or 11 when the last time I watched it, and I didn't really think that much about movies back then. And I'm like, okay, maybe they won't hold up. But they actually do hold up surprisingly well, right? And it does feel, most of them at least, do feel like, and you may think, okay, why aren't you going through them like one by one? It's because I don't really feel like I need to talk about each movie like separately, because a trilogy, as I believe this was meant to be, is meant to be looked at as a unified picture, and moments in each movie do kind of blend together. But that's not really a problem with it, because that's the way these films were designed, and that's the way the books were designed as well. They were designed to be one unified picture. So that doesn't bother me that a lot of the moments do kind of mesh together in my mind after I watch them. Like, which movie was that from? I don't really care. It's just like a fun experience, right? But they do always have like something in there that's like pretty heartwarming and nice, right? And that in the first film is, his relationship with Rowley and what it really means to become like a good friend, right? And I'm actually going through kind of, and this kind of leads into another thing that I like about it is the books. Well, they are certainly like kind of relatable to some extent for, younger kids, and even to me a little bit. They are very like cartoonified. They're very exaggerated, like silly stories where it's kind of like you have to just suspend your disbelief a little bit. Like, that's not entirely believable. In the movies, they're very, of course, exaggerated and silly, but and they have a very silly directorial style and stuff like that. But they do feel very like personal and human and relatable. And like the issues in the first movie, right? Even though I'm like in high school now, I'm a teenager, and these guys are like starting middle school in the first movie, and like this trilogy takes place over like a couple of years of middle school, right? There's still relatability there. Like his relationship with his friend Rowley, I'm going through kind of a problem with one of my friends in real life, and it's very similar to that, right? And it's kind of like you've got to think about, like, Greg has to reevaluate and be like, okay, am I being a good friend? What part do I play in this relationship? And he's kind of like, oh, whatever, this is what it has to do with, being popular and being like, the cool version of me. And then he has to figure out, what's the real version of me? Like, I need to be the best version of myself, right? And what does being a good friend really mean? And Rowley in the movie is not in the wrong entirely. Because Greg's like, oh, you breaking your hand was the best thing that ever happened to you, right? And there's conflict there. There's actually real, tangible conflict because, Greg's not in the right, but Rowley did, like, he is using, in a way, his injury as a way to get attention, and Greg tries to copy that, and obviously it doesn't work because that's stupid. But, well, like, obviously getting an injury is not a good thing. Greg does have a point. Like, you are using your injury as a cause for attention, which is not entirely a great thing to do, right? But Rowley does realize, he's like, hey, dude, you're not a good friend, right? And it's like, okay, yeah, that's true. He's not actually a good friend. And Greg has to kind of really deal with that and think about the fact, am I being a good friend or not? And then I find that really good. I find that really tangible, relatable stuff, where I find that to be very tangible and relatable. And then the second one, I think Roderick Rules is the best one out of the three, because you get lots of Devin Bostic, and he's freaking great. And it's very funny, very relatable, right? Because I've got an older brother too, and we've kind of got a similar relationship to Greg and Roderick, as exaggerated as it is in the films and books. It's still very relatable, and it does kind of tug at the heartstrings a little bit, right? And then in the third one, he's got to kind of figure out like what's going on with his dad and him, and how they aren't so different, but it's not so much his dad's mad; it's just so much that he's disappointed that. Well, I think they're trying to say at the beginning that his dad's disappointed that he can't make Greg like him, kind of. But by the end, he's more disappointed in the fact that, like, he has to come to terms with the fact that Greg is not like him, you know? And I think that's pretty cool. Like, there are weird points. Like, there's a plot point in the second one where Roderick wants to play at this Battle of the Bands kind of talent show thing, and the parents won't let him. They're like, we won't let you as a punishment. But then in the end, like, it's very rushed over. I think it's probably, I don't actually think it's more explained in the book, but Greg just quickly says, oh, they just said something about supporting the community, so we had to go anyway. And I'm like, these parents are very strict like this. I don't think it's in character for them to, as a punishment, not let Roderick play in the show, but then also take him to the show to also kind of punish him in a way by making him watch his own band play in front of him without him. I don't think that's very realistic for that family. And, that's another thing about it. They do feel like a family. They don't feel like exaggerated cartoon characters that don't get along like in the books. They do feel like a real family and like real people, and they go through realistic struggles, which I do appreciate about the films, right? And so that's kind of a weak point in the second one. I don't find it believable that they just make them go to the talent show, and it's like the ending, the whole sequence there at the talent show at the end is actually pretty good, but the way they got to that was very rushed. They're just like, okay, here's the ending. It does feel like the first one kind of ends and doesn't feel like there was really a big climax. In a way, like there was kind of with the cheese touch or whatever and the bullies showing up. But the second one, Roderick Rules, does have more of a natural climax because you've got the talent show, and that's where all the plot lines in the film come to a head and connect. But it does not feel like the way they got to that feels earned. The parents made them go, even though they already told Roderick he couldn't play in the shows. They're just making him watch it, which is just kind of mean. It doesn't feel in character for the parents. And once again, I'm not judging, like, okay, whether or not that's being accurate to the book. Like, I've gotten this a lot when I criticize something, and I'm not saying, like, knocking against you guys. I'm just saying in general, when I criticize something, some people are saying, well, it's accurate. Like, when I criticize something in Marvel, right? I criticize something in the films, and someone says, well, that's accurate to the comic book, right? And you guys gotta understand that I don't read comic books, right? I do read books. I read lots of books, but I don't read comic books. So when I criticize something in a Marvel movie, I'm judging it as a movie, as a film, and how it works in the film, not on how accurate it is to the source material. And that's the same thing I'm judging here with Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And there's a difference, there's kind of an argument to be made about, the criticisms of films and stuff. Like, if something is distinctly better than the films, like, I believe that the Harry Potter book series is considerably better than the films. And there's an argument to be made there, like, okay, are you going against your judgment here, where you're not judging them as films? But when something is so much better than something else, it's kind of hard to ignore that. But I do think the books are very good, and I think the movies are very good in this case. So I think it's fair for me to say that I'm judging it as a film and not off the source material, because I haven't read them in a while, and I don't remember entirely how they get to the climax in the book. And then we get to the third film, and it's the weakest in my mind. The Dog Days, they squished the third and fourth books into one. I believe it's called The Last Straw and The Long Haul. And it's kind of cool to see how they did that. They took kind of it's like a best of compilation of both the books, and they put it into a movie. And it's still a fun movie, right? It's still really good. But there are like weird unresolved plot points. Like Greg and Rowley have this weird falling out, but they just resolve it really quickly. And it does feel like the other two movies took longer to resolve those kind of relationship issues than the third one does. They just kind of resolve them very quickly. And when Greg shows up to the country club or whatever, and he likes Holly Hills, and then Rowley's like, oh yeah, she's always here. And he's like, don't you think you should have told me that? And then Rowley like sighs really heavily, and they're kind of implying that Rowley also likes Holly Hills, but Holly Hills was never a prominent character, as prominent of a character in the books as she is in the movies. She was there for like one book, and then she kind of got kicked out of it. So I like that they actually gave her more of a character and gave her more of a purpose in the movies than in the books. But it does feel like there's kind of an unresolved plot point there. Like, what they were clearly going for something there, where both characters were going for the same goal. They both wanted the girl, but they kind of didn't. They didn't explore it. They just kind of drop it. They never really go anywhere with it, which I find kind of weird because like I said, it does feel like they resolve the issues, the relationship issues in the third one. Besides Greg and his father, they really do resolve them a lot quicker than the other two. Whereas in the other two, they do feel like they take longer and more. They dedicate more time to make it feel natural when these relationship issues are resolved, as opposed to the third film, where a lot of it feels very, not entirely rushed, but it does feel like because they kind of squeezed two books into a movie and just kind of took the best parts of both, they don't always all mesh. But it's still a good movie. It's still very fun, and also the music in this is very, very good. It's very fanfare-y and very fun, and I really like the score. It's honestly pretty iconic. Not a lot of people talk about it, but it's a very iconic musical score in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid films. And yes, this video has been going for 15 minutes, right? And it was once again, this was responding to a poll where I said I rewatched a couple of franchises that I haven't talked about on the channel, and you guys all voted, the majority at least, voted for Diary of Wimpy Kid. So I'm going to post another poll talking about what I should do next. You guys can vote again. I will probably do Chronicles of Narnia, but we'll have to see. Please let me know if you want to see the Chronicles of Narnia trilogy reviewed before, apparently they're going to make the Silver Chair, which they keep saying they're going to make, but they've never made. Anyway, that's pretty much it on my overview of kind of a classic, kind of older movie trilogy, kind of, I guess, a retrospective, but also just kind of a fun little nostalgic trip back to reviewing the Diary of a Wimpy Kid trilogy. Very fun to do this, and I really enjoyed it. So please let me know all your thoughts on the Diary of a Wimpy Kid trilogy. How would you rank them, I guess? What are your thoughts on each one? Which one do you think is the weakest? Which one do you think is the best? Whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.